Elena Martinez never imagined war would feel so quiet. She had grown up in Fresno, California, where noise was constant. Rumbling trucks on I-99, stray dogs barking at dusk, her mother yelling at the news while folding laundry. Even at the Army base back in Texas, the clamor of foot drills, marching boots, and kitchen banter had been her soundtrack. But here, halfway up a jagged ridge in the middle of eastern Afghanistan, there was nothing. Just wind. Just space. She crouched low behind a rock formation, her olive-green medical pack pressed against her back like a second spine. The weight was familiar now. Gauze rolls, saline IVs, syringes, a field defibrillator, morphine, bandages, and one tightly folded American flag she hoped she'd never have to use. To the others, it was a glorified first aid kit. To her, it was the difference between someone going home and someone being mailed home. Elena didn't mind being invisible. In fact, she preferred it. Let the boys joke and compete over confirmed kills and sniper stats. Let them flex during shooting drills and take turns recounting firefights like fish stories. She kept her head down, memorized every terrain map she could find, and made sure she could stitch a wound in the dark with trembling hands. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to keep fighters breathing. Most of the platoon treated her with a kind of vague politeness. Not disrespect, but distant recognition, like you'd give a fire extinguisher. Good to have around. Not someone you talk to unless something's burning. "Hey, Doc," Sergeant Ben Carter had said that morning, handing her a mug of reconstituted coffee. "Hope you get a boring day." She had smiled. Always. It was a sort of superstition among medics to wish for boredom. Number. Action meant no injuries. No injuries meant no one screaming your name with blood pouring from their side. It meant your heart stayed tucked quietly in your chest instead of trying to explode out of your throat. But even then, part of her knew something was off. They'd been assigned to Ridge 72, a rocky overlook above a narrow pass that insurgents had used in the past to smuggle arms, drugs, and fighters. The mission was routine. A patrol in the valley below would move forward and scan the pass. Elena would accompany the sniper team and radio operator to the ridge. From up high, they'd provide overwatch, eyes in the sky. Not engaging. Not advancing. Just watching. Simple. Clean. Boring. She preferred missions like this. The hike up the ridge had taken 2 hours under a cruel sun. The sniper, a tall, pale-faced guy named Becker, hadn't said much. He never did. The radio operator, Corporal Travis Dean, kept grumbling about a jammed antenna and how this whole place smelled like goat piss and betrayal. Elena had said nothing. She just adjusted her pack and kept walking. Now, crouched on the ridge, she scanned the valley through her small field binoculars. Far below, the patrol moved in formation, 6 shadows against the dry, cracked floor of the canyon. They were tiny from up here, distant, like ants playing at war. She turned her attention back to the terrain. Rocky outcrops, shrubs clinging stubbornly to dead soil. Nothing moved. "See anything?" Dean asked from her left, fiddling with his radio. "Negative," she replied. Her voice was soft, but certain. Becker lay prone a few feet ahead, his rifle barrel barely peeking over a ledge. "Too quiet," he murmured. Dean laughed, a short, nervous bark. "You serious? You want fireworks or something?" "No," Becker said, emotionless. "But they usually send birds." Elena glanced up. The sky was empty. No hawks, no vultures, not even crows. It was something she hadn't noticed until now. The silence had shape, a kind of weight to it. She shifted slightly, rolling her shoulders to ease the tension. Her medical gear rustled against her back. She had one hand on her thigh, feeling the faint Familiar pulse through her combat pants. Calm. Focused. Still, she couldn't shake the prickle in the back of her neck. Like the air itself was watching. She thought about the letter from her mother tucked in her vest pocket. It was creased and reread so many times, the ink had started to blur. Mihajja, keep your head down. You're not there to be a hero. You're there to come home. Her mother never understood why she joined. Elena hadn't either, not fully. But she knew what it meant to feel useful, necessary. She had never been loud, never been the strongest or the fastest. But when someone screamed for help, really screamed, she ran toward them. Not away. A gust of wind kicked sand across her face. She blinked and looked down again. The patrol continued through the valley. No signs of trouble. No signs of life, really. Becker tapped his scope, muttering about light distortion. Then came the softest sound, barely there. A bird? A whisper? Elena turned her head, trying to locate it. Nothing. Dean muttered. Something into the radio. Static. Elena's gut twisted. No reason, no logic. Just instinct. The ridge felt like it was holding its breath. She reached for her canteen, uncapped it, took a long sip, and stared down the ridge again. Nothing moved. And yet, everything felt like it was about to. Elena Martinez had been invisible. Her whole deployment. Just support. Just the medic. But war has a cruel way of calling out the quiet ones when it needs them most. And this ridge was about to speak. The ridge always felt too far from everything that mattered. Too high to intervene, too distant to feel real. Elena had learned to live with that strange disconnection. From Ridge 72, war looked like a video game. Tiny soldiers moved below. Enemies rarely showed their faces, and the crack of gunfire felt like sound effects echoing through the wind. But today, something was wrong. At first, it was subtle. The way the air hung heavier than usual. The stillness in the brush, where even the flies had gone quiet. Elena sat cross-legged on a flat rock, field binoculars pressed to her face, scanning the dusty trail that wound through the pass like a snake. She tried to focus, but the unease tugged at her like a loose thread on her uniform. Dean was sitting behind her with the radio, biting into a cold protein bar and muttering obscenities about com interference. Damn things scratchy again. These valleys are like death traps for signals. They should have sent up a damn repeater drone. Becker didn't look away from his scope. They didn't. Elena shifted her weight. Still no movement in. A pass, she said, her voice calm, but her eyes kept sweeping. Becker responded with a grunt, his usual way of saying noted. Below. The patrol moved slowly, cautiously. They were in what the maps called the neckline of the valley, a stretch of crumbled rock surrounded on both sides by low cliffs. It was a natural choke point, strategically important, strategically dangerous. Elena knew the terrain as well as anyone. She'd studied the ridge lines every night before deployment. If she had to medevac a wounded soldier up one of those cliffs, she wanted to know every ledge and loose stone. But today, she wasn't thinking about evacuation. She was thinking about what she wasn't seeing. Anyone else feel off? She asked quietly. Becker's jaw shifted as he chewed a stick of gum. It's always off out here. Dean snorted. You mean besides the fact we're baking, like potatoes on a rock with zero backup? No, Elena said, scanning again. I mean the birds. What? There aren't any. Becker paused. Dean frowned. What? You miss birds now? I don't miss them. I just notice when they're not here. Dean opened his mouth to make a joke, and stopped. He looked out toward the empty sky. The breeze picked up again, dry and hot, rolling dust down the ridge like spilled sugar. From their vantage point, they could see almost 2 kilometers in either direction. but the pass was quiet. Too quiet. Becker suddenly stiffened. "Hold on," he said. Elena looked over. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the focus on his long-range scope, zeroing in on a cluster of rocks near the southern lip of the canyon. Then again, just to the north. "Could be heat shimmer," he muttered. "Or," Elena pressed, "or its movement." Dean leaned toward his radio, twisting the knob. "Patrol, this is Ridge 7-2. You copy?" Over. Double quotes static. He tried again, adjusting frequency. "This is Ridge 7-2. To Alpha Patrol, do you read?" Over. Elena lowered her binoculars. Her heart thudded just once, hard, like a drum being tested. No answer. "Try backup channel," she said. Dean already was. Becker was still watching the rocks. "If they're hiding, they're good at it. I've got a shimmer, but no profile. Could be our guys. Could be not." The static continued. Elena rose to her knees, shielding her eyes from the sun and searching the skyline with narrowed eyes. Still no movement. Still no birds. Just the wind. And the silence, which now pressed against her ears like hands. Then something shifted below. She caught it. Just for a second. A glint. Not sun-off rock. Not natural. It was glass. A scope. "Contact," Becker said suddenly, flat and calm. Dean's hands froze on the radio. Elena turned sharply. "Where?" "North Cliff, behind the outcrop. Long gun. Watching the patrol." "Do they see him?" "No," Becker said. "Too far, wrong angle." Elena grabbed her binos again and swept the ridge Becker indicated. It took her several seconds, but she caught the figure. Half a silhouette, barely more than a smear in the shadows. But it was there. "Confirmed," she said. "At least one sniper. Could be more." Dean's face was pale now. "We can't get a signal down." Elena's stomach dropped. She looked back toward the patrol, still moving into the choke point. Blind, exposed. "Targets. We've got to warn them," she said. Dean shook his head. "Unless you've got a flare or a megaphone, they're on their own." Elena didn't say it, but they all knew the truth. If the patrol was being watched, it wasn't for fun. This was prep, scouting. An ambush was coming. Maybe minutes away, maybe seconds. Becker checked his rifle. If they hit the valley floor, they're dead. Elena's hands tightened around her binos. They were too far away to run down in time. Too far to shout. Too high to help, unless someone fired first. "We're not supposed to engage," Dean said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Rules say we're overwatch only, unless we're under direct threat." Becker nodded, loading. A round into the chamber. Then they better shoot at us first. But Elena wasn't watching the cliffs anymore. She was watching the path behind them, where 3 new shapes had just appeared. Figures. Climbing. Slowly. Silently. She lowered the binoculars. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "There. Not down there anymore." Dean blinked. "What?" "They're coming up the ridge." The shadows stretched long across Ridge 72 as the sun began to dip behind the far peaks, casting deep gold over the valley floor. What had once been a quiet stillness now bristled with invisible tension. Every sound, the wind brushing dry. Grass, the shift of boots on gravel, felt too loud. Too sharp. Elena Martinez had gone still. Her eyes were fixed on the slope behind them, where 3 human forms had begun to ascend, slow, methodical, not scrambling like hikers, but moving. With purpose. Purpose and stealth. She didn't need to see their faces to know. "These weren't friendlies. They're coming up behind us," she repeated. Louder this time. Becker didn't ask questions. He rolled smoothly onto his back, pivoted his rifle. Toward the slope, and lowered his eye to the scope. Confirming. Dean grabbed his radio again and hissed into the mic. Ridge 7-2 to HQ. We have enemy movement on the high ground. Repeat, we are compromised on the ridge. Do you copy? Over. Static. He looked at Elena and shook his head. Becker's breath caught. Confirmed. 3 tangos, armed. 2 with rifles. One's hauling gear. Mortar tube, maybe. They're 150 yards out and closing. Elena's fingers closed around the strap of her medical pack, instinctively. Not that bandages would help them now. Dean's voice was tight. They gonna see us? They? Will soon, Becker murmured. They're tracking straight toward our flank. We're gonna be pinned between them and whatever's waiting in that pass. The realization struck like cold water. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a coordinated attack down below. The patrol was fully exposed. Elena swept her binoculars. Toward them, 6 soldiers still moving forward in formation. Unaware. No warning. No idea what was coming. God? She breathed. And then it started. From the far end of the pass. A sudden burst of gunfire. Echoing, harsh, relentless. It cracked through the canyon like a whip, followed by a radio scream. Contact. Contact left. Taking fire. Then more. We're pinned. Need cover now. The comms came alive with chaos. Overlapping voices. Bullets hitting metal. The raw noise of panic and barked commands. Becker didn't hesitate. He was already shifting to provide long cover. They're in the kill box, he said. Whole squads exposed. Dean was working the radio like a madman. This is Ridge 7-2. Our patrol is under fire. Repeat, under fire in the pass. Requesting. Immediate support. Grid reference. More gunfire. This time closer. Echoing up from the valley, but also from their right. Elena's heart pounded. Not with fear, not yet, but with the high-octane clarity that flooded her veins during trauma work. That sense of snapping into place. Of now it matters. She dropped beside Becker. What do you need? Spotter, he grunted. Scan. The right slope. There's gonna be shooters. Elena didn't argue. She swept the binoculars across the canyon wall, and there they were. Faint flashes like fireflies in daylight. Muzzle flares. 2 shooters, maybe 3. One higher, near the dry brush, just above that V-shaped rock. Got him. Becker fired. Crack. Pause. Crack. The shots echoed like thunder. Then, nothing. Just the wind again. One fewer muzzle flash, but it wasn't enough. Down below, the patrol was shouting, some voices screaming in pain, others calling out wounded. Then, man down, we need a medic. Elena's spine stiffened. Dean turned to her. You can't? I'm not leaving the ridge, she snapped. They don't even know we're compromised up here. Becker cursed. They're getting ready to drop mortar. Dean's eyes went wide. You sure? Becker nodded. That gear they're carrying? It's not for hiking. Elena's mind was racing. Her team couldn't abandon the Overwatch post. It would leave the patrol blind. But staying meant death if those insurgents got that mortar set up. And there was no help coming. Not soon enough. Becker checked his sidearm and glanced at Elena. If they set up, we're done. They're heading for that flat stretch near the rock outcropping. Great place to fire from. How long? Elena asked. 2 minutes tops. Dean was white as chalk. No. Orders are to hold unless we're directly engaged. They will be, Becker growled. Soon. Elena stared at the sniper rifle, then at the secondary M4 resting beside Becker. It wasn't assigned to anyone. Just back up. It sat there like a challenge. Becker, she said. What? Pass me the M4. He turned. You serious? She nodded once. You ever fired outside the range? No. You miss, we're dead. I won't. There was no time for speeches. Becker slid the M4 toward her. It was heavier than she remembered. She dropped into a crouch behind a boulder, braced the rifle against her shoulder, and focused through the scope at her target, the insurgent in front, the one hauling the mortar base plate. He was barely visible, half hidden behind scrub. But he paused, just for a moment. She squeezed crack. The sound jolted through the ridge. The insurgent dropped, the mortar clattering to the rocks. Dean gasped. Holy! The second insurgent ducked. The third vanished into cover. Becker's rifle barked again. The ridge fell silent. The patrol was still pinned. But now, the flank was broken. The mortar never fired. And someone on Overwatch had just changed the entire equation. Elena lowered the rifle, exhaling slowly. Becker stared at her. Dean was speechless. No one said a word, but every one of them knew what just happened. She was no longer just the medic, and war had just made room for a new kind of soldier. For a long second after the shot, there was only silence. Not the usual mountain silence, not the distant hum of wind or the crackle of static, but a vacuum, like the world itself had stopped to register what just happened. Elena Martinez exhaled slowly, lowering the M4 just enough to see beyond the scope. The insurgent she'd aimed at, the one carrying the mortar base plate, was motionless now, face down in the dirt. His hands had never even touched the trigger. Behind her, Dean whispered something that didn't sound like English. His voice shook as he stared at her like she'd turned into something he didn't understand. You dropped him, he said. Elena didn't answer. She didn't feel anything yet. No triumph. No horror. Just a profound stillness in her. Bones. The kind that comes right before a trauma patient flatlines. The same cold, quiet clarity. She knew this feeling. She'd just never expected it to follow a trigger pull. Becker leaned toward her. That was clean, he said. I mean it. You saved our lives. She met his eyes, but said nothing. The words didn't matter. Not now. Down below, the firefight was still going. Bursts of gunfire, echoing in and out of radio distortion. The squad was taking cover, dragging wounded behind whatever rocks they could find. Shouts for medics crackled in and out like desperate ghosts. We need to get comes to HQ, Dean said, fiddling with the antenna again. They've got to scramble QRF, or we're going to have body bags in that valley. Becker returned to his scope. Other two tangos pulled back. They bailed as soon as Doc fired. Cowards weren't ready for resistance. They were expecting an easy flank, Elena murmured, and they almost got it. Dean hesitated. We weren't supposed to engage. You know that, right? She looked at him, her voice measured. And if I hadn't? That mortar would be active. This ridge would be ash, and the entire patrol would be gone. I'm not saying you are wrong, he replied quickly, holding up his hands. Hell, I think you just saved a dozen guys. I'm just saying, this changes things. She knew what he meant. She could feel it. That invisible line, the one between medic and soldier, had been crossed. Not with hesitation, but with purpose, with instinct. And there was no going back. Becker's voice cut in. Heads up, we're not out of it yet. I've got movement West Ridge. Might be a second team. Could be a fallback plan. Dean turned pale. More tangos? Could be, Becker said. Or reinforcements. I don't know yet. Just saw a shadow flash and then disappear. Elena scanned quickly with her binoculars. The ridge across the canyon was darker now, dipped in shadow as the sun slid further behind the peaks. Visibility was low, too low to rely on optics alone. They needed more time, more eyes, more help. Radio still dead? Elena asked. Dean cursed and slammed a fist on the side of the pack. Still nothing. We're not getting out to base without a drone boost or relay antenna. And those are either broken, jammed, or offline. She looked toward the south, where the sun had begun to bleed orange into the sky. Shadows lengthened. The ridge darkened. Time was slipping fast. We can't just sit here, she said. We have to, Dean argued. Orders were to hold overwatch position. If we move, the whole structure falls apart. Becker snorted. The structure's already falling apart. Elena stood slowly, sliding the M4 back onto its strap. The rifle felt heavier now, not physically, but morally. She wasn't trained to use it this way. She wasn't sent to Afghanistan to fire weapons. But the war didn't care what her paperwork said. She moved back to her original perch and scanned the valley below. The patrol had regrouped behind a line of rocks. They were holding, barely. A voice crackled and weak over the coms, fragmented. Choppy. -2, this is Alpha. Wounded, requesting. Dean perked up. That's them. He adjusted the frequency and spoke fast. Alpha Patrol, this is Ridge 7-2. Say again, status? More static. Then, under fire, 2 wounded, need evac, can't move. Elena's stomach sank. She leaned into the radio. This is Martinez. I'm receiving. I copy. You've got 1 Kier, 2 Waya, requesting Pacific? Affirmative. We're trapped. Becker pulled his head back from the scope. Sniper's gone cold. I think they're repositioning. We need to act fast, Elena said. Dean shook his head. We act without orders. It's a court-martial. You know that, right? Becker laughed dryly. Doc already fired a shot. I think we're past protocol now. Elena checked her pack, mentally running through her triage supplies. If they didn't get medevac soon, those 2 wounded soldiers would die. 1 more bullet, 1 more minute of blood loss. It wouldn't take much. She'd seen it before. She'd measured life in seconds. Then she turned back to Dean. I need you to keep trying HQ every 60 seconds. Becker, eyes on the western ridge. If anything moves, you shoot. And you? Becker asked. I'm going down, she said. Dean's jaw dropped. That's suicide. I'm the medic, she said simply. They need me. And if I stay here, I'll be hearing them scream in my headset while I do nothing. Becker looked at her for a moment, then gave a single nod. Dean didn't argue further. He knew the look in her eyes. She wasn't asking permission. She was telling him what came next. Elena checked her harness, grabbed 2 extra tourniquets, and made for the edge of the ridge. The sun dipped lower, the wind whistled, and far below, a patrol bled in the dust. She descended into the fire. Elena Martinez had trained for battlefield trauma. She'd studied arterial bleeds, tourniquet placement, improvised airway management under fire. What she hadn't trained for, what no one had, was sprinting into an active ambush alone, armed with nothing but instinct, a medpack, and 1 half-emptied rifle she'd never been issued. Her boots skidded on loose shale as she moved down the ridge, keeping low to the rocks. Each step felt deafening. She moved like a shadow, every sense sharpened. This wasn't adrenaline. It was survival clarity. Her ears tracked the sound of distant gunfire. Her eyes measured the gaps between cover. Her pulse drummed in rhythm with the terrain. Behind her, Becker's voice came through the comm. They're repositioning. 1 shooter west. Possibly high. Ground, can't get a visual. Dean added, HQ still not responding. I'm boosting signal off the drone's relay. Might be 5 minutes, if we're lucky. I don't have 5, Elena replied, breath tight. The ridge curved downward into the outer lip of the canyon. From here, she could see the patrol's position more clearly. 6 soldiers huddled behind scattered boulders. 1 was slumped. Another was crawling. A third was screaming, not in fear, but in fury. Elena's eyes locked on the wounded. She counted blood trails, body angles, motion. Her brain automatically assessed injuries. One gut wound, slow bleed. Manageable if stabilized. One leg hit, arterial, likely femoral. He won't last without pressure. She was 40 meters away when she spotted the flank. 2 insurgents. High on a ledge above the patrol, preparing to sweep fire across the rocks. Where her team hid. One of them lifted something, not a rifle. A cylindrical tube, laser, DESIGNATOR. That her heart stopped. They weren't just shooting. They were preparing for a mortar strike, which meant someone else, somewhere nearby, had the launch tube. And once the designator was locked, it would take seconds to fire. Her rifle came up automatically. The M4's scope wasn't built for this distance. She adjusted anyway, sliding behind a rock and bracing the barrel. She had no time for breath control. No time for range finding. The insurgent raised the laser. Again. She didn't think. She fired. Crack. The shot echoed across the canyon like a THUNDERCLAP. The man with the designator folded instantly, crumpling backward off the ledge. The device clattered, rolled, then vanished from sight. The second insurgent dropped flat and scrambled behind cover. Below. The patrol froze. Then nothing. No mortar. No follow-up strike. Just dust. Just silence. Her shot had cut the cord. Elena stared through the scope for 2 more seconds. Breath shallow. Her shoulder ached from the recoil. Her fingers tingled. Shot confirmed. Becker's voice said in her ear. You dropped him. I saw the laser fall. Dean followed. What the hell, Martinez? That was 100-meter headwind and a partial elevation angle. You just focus, she snapped. I'm moving in. She broke from cover and ran. The slope was harsh, jagged. She skidded once, caught herself, and kept moving. At the base of the ridge, gunfire still echoed in sporadic bursts, but now it was returning fire. The patrol had rallied. She reached the first wounded soldier, Private Lanton. The leg wound. Blood soaked his pants, spurting with each heartbeat. Elena dropped to her knees beside him. Hold still, he gasped. Doc? Tourniquet. Going on. You're going to be okay. She yanked the fabric strap high on his thigh, twisted the rod, and locked it in place. The bleeding slowed. His breathing DIDN single quotes T. She turned to the second man. Corporal J, the gut wound. His face was pale, lips dry. I've got you, she murmured. Didn't know you came down? Yeah, well, orders don't mean much if you're all dead. She applied pressure dressing, shot him with morphine, and fed him half a saline bag. Her hands moved with practiced certainty, even as bullets cracked over their heads. From her headset, mortar teams retreating. Becker called. Whoever's left is bailing downhill. You might have scared the whole flank off, Dean added. HQ just came online. QRF's inbound. You've got 5, maybe 6 minutes before the birds arrive. Elena glanced skyward. Still empty. Still. Waiting. She ducked and checked the rest of the squad. 1 Kia, 2 wounded, 3 still able to fight. She rallied them into position, had them spread cover, rearm, take field angles. Her voice was calm, steady. A medic in name. A tactician in action. And all around them, the ambush fell apart. The single shot she'd taken on the ridge hadn't just broken the mortar team. It had exposed the enemy's coordination. It forced them to react instead of attack. It broke their timeline. And in battle, timing was everything. Birds inbound, Dean confirmed. Dust off in 2. Hang tight. Elena stayed kneeling beside Jay, applying another pressure bandage. She could already hear rotors in the distance. The corporal looked at her through half-lidded eyes. "You're the medic, right?" She smiled faintly. "That's me. Thought you didn't shoot." "Neither did I." The first thing Elena noticed was the sound of rotors. Dull, rhythmic thunder building in the distance, rising like a storm behind the ridge. The quick reaction force was inbound. She stayed crouched beside Corporal J, one gloved hand pressing against the soaked field dressing on his abdomen, the other steadying in foredrip she'd improvised by tying it to her knee. His pulse had stabilized, weak but steady. Lanton, the one with the leg wound, had passed out from the morphine. His tourniquet cinched so tight the fabric cut into his skin. Above them, the sky turned darker, not with weather. With dusk. The Apache gunship arrived. First. It screamed in. From the north, its blades roaring across the valley like some ancient god made of steel and vengeance. As it passed above the ridge, it dipped low and released a short burst from its chain gun. The cliff face that had hidden the enemy sniper disintegrated into a cloud of rock and smoke. Elena didn't flinch. She was too tired, too focused. 2 Black Hawks followed behind, one loaded with additional troops, the other configured for medical evac. As they descended into the valley, Becker's voice crackled in her ear. "Nice timing, huh?" Elena exhaled. Just a few minutes too late. "In." Cut in, his voice slightly clearer, now that the signal relay had kicked in. "HQ says insurgents are pulling back west. Drone feed shows disorganized retreat. No more mortar crews. No more contact." Becker added, "We held the ridge." Elena looked down at her hands, stained with blood. Barely. The Black Hawks kicked up waves of dust as they landed. Medics poured out, efficient and fast. One of them moved to take over from her. She briefed them quickly, giving vitals and drug history in clipped sentences. Then she stepped back and let them work. Her legs felt strange. Not sore, just numb. She stood slowly, the weight of her medpack finally pulling at her spine. Captain Morgan, the squad's commanding officer, was among the last to disembark. His face, crusted with sweat and dirt, was etched with lines that hadn't been there that morning. He approached Elena with cautious intensity. "Martinez," he said, pulling her aside. "Sir." He stared at her. "You broke Overwatch protocol. Left your post. Fired a weapon you weren't issued." "Yes, sir." "You engaged the enemy. Alone, without orders." "I did." He didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked at her. Not with anger, but with the unspoken tension of someone juggling military law against human survival. "Did you get authorization from anyone before you made the shot?" he asked finally. "No," she said. "Why?" She glanced over at Lanton, now loaded onto a stretcher, and at Jay, being wheeled toward the medevac. "Because I didn't need permission to stop a mortar team from killing every man down here." The captain's jaw flexed. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're lucky," he said. "This could have ended a lot worse." It almost did. He looked up at the ridge, at the sniper's nest where Becker still lay prone. Rifle ready, a quiet sentinel. "You changed the outcome of the fight." Elena didn't respond. "HQ already debriefed Becker in Dean Overcomes," he continued. "They confirmed everything. You identified the threat, took initiative, and eliminated a high-value target before the patrol was overrun." "Sir, save it," he sighed. "No one's writing you up." She blinked. He looked at her more closely now, at the dirt caked to her uniform, the dried blood on her gloves, the fatigue in her eyes. "You okay?" "I'm tired, sir." "I'll bet." They stood in silence for a moment as the wounded were loaded onto the Black Hawk. Becker jogged down from the ridge, his gear dusty, his expression unreadable. He gave Elena a sharp nod as he passed, not casual. Not flippant. Respect. Real respect. Dean followed behind, shouting something about how the radio miraculously started working again as soon as backup arrived. We were practically smoke. Signals up there. And she's the one that saved everyone. Just saying, Dean. Captain Morgan growled. Dean went silent. As the Black Hawks lifted off. The valley began to empty. Reinforcements moved in to sweep the area. The echoes of the ambush faded. Elena stood still, her feet planted in the dirt where she'd made her shot. The sun was almost gone now. The sky burned orange and purple across the peaks. She could barely hear the rotors anymore. And finally, it hit her. Not fear. Not guilt. Not regret. Just wait. She had fired a single bullet. One that would be talked about in briefings and reports. One that had changed the fate of a patrol. One that had turned Doc Martinez into something else entirely. She hadn't wanted it, but the ridge had demanded it. And now she carried it. As the last helicopter vanished into the sky, she turned and climbed back toward her post. The ridge still stood, quiet. Watching. She understood now. It wasn't just a vantage point. It was a proving ground. The base was quieter than she remembered. Not in sound. A hum of generators still buzzed in the background. The occasional shout of an officer or the metallic clang of gear still echoed across the motor pool. But in energy, the air was heavy. Still. Elena stepped off the transport with her rifle slung awkwardly over her shoulder. She'd never carried one before. Not like that. Not as something that defined her. Her boots hit the dirt, and for a moment, the world tilted. Fatigue wrapped around her spine like lead wire. Her fingers still tingled from the shot, though it had been hours. Her whole body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. But when she looked up, something was different. Eyes were on her. Not wide-eyed with pity, not casual glances, like she was just another face behind the front lines. These were pointed stares, measured, curious, the kind soldiers give someone they're trying to figure out. She walked past the mess hall. A group of infantry guys paused mid-conversation as she passed. One of them, someone she'd patched up weeks ago, gave her a slow nod. Not the usual thanks you doc nod. This one was sharper. Earned. She didn't nod back. Didn't know how. She headed straight to the medical tent to restock and submit her report. The clipboard felt heavier than usual. The words robotic. 2 wounded stabilized. 1 Kia. Mortar team disrupted. Combat action taken by field medic in support of patrol under fire. Shot fired to prevent forward targeting. She didn't write heroic. She didn't write saved lives. Just facts. That's how she'd always done it. But when she turned the clipboard in, Major Weller, the ranking medical officer, didn't even look at the sheet. You discharged your weapon during active engagement? He asked. Yes, sir, Elena said, standing straighter. He leaned back in his chair, studying her like a strange artifact. You hit the target? Yes. From Overwatch? Yes. With an M4? She didn't answer that one. Just held his gaze. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and said, Well, I'll be damned. That was all. No ceremony, no medal, no reprimand, just surprise and something else behind it. Maybe admiration. She stepped out into the late evening sun. The sky was fading toward blue-gray. Sand swirled lazily in the courtyard. Her hands twitched as she unclipped her gloves, revealing fingernails crusted with blood and dust. Martinez, she turned. Dean jogged up, his helmet under one arm, the other waving wildly. You are everywhere, he said with a grin. You've been back what? 20 minutes? I've heard 3 versions already. One says you used the sniper's own rifle and made a shot from 300 yards like a ghost. Another says you dove off the ridge, and stabbed a guy with a syringe of adrenaline. Becker says you teleported. Elena stared. Dean shrugged. Okay, maybe he didn't say that exactly, but you get the idea. I shot one guy, she said flatly, and stopped a mortar team. Dean's smile didn't falter. Yeah, and that guy was the guy. And you weren't supposed to shoot anyone at all. You changed the game. She shook her head. I just reacted. Exactly, he said. That's what heroes do. I'm not a hero. You keep saying that, Dean said, then patted her on the shoulder and wandered off. But people are going to decide for themselves. By the time she made it to the barracks, her cot had been stripped. At first, she thought someone had reassigned her bunk, until she found a folded blanket, clean socks, and a handwritten note on her footlocker. Ridgewatch 72. Dead-Eye Doc. Coffee on me tomorrow. Becker. She let out something between a scoff and a breathless laugh. Dead-Eye Doc. She hadn't earned that nickname. Not in the traditional way, but the Ridge had changed her. She sat down on the cot, finally letting herself slump. Her pack slid off her shoulders with a thud. Her rifle leaned against the wall. She stared at it. Not a tool she wanted, but maybe one she needed. Later that night, she heard more whispers outside the barracks. She's the medic, right? The one from the Ridge. Said she took the shot before the sniper even saw. The guy, they're reviewing the footage. Might put her in for accommodation. Crazy how one bullet changed the whole fight. Elena lay back on her cot, arm draped over her eyes. She didn't feel powerful, or brave, or anything remotely close to what they were saying. She just felt responsible. And awake. She knew that. Whatever they decided, awards, promotions, recognition, none of it would matter the way the silence did. The moment after the shot, the breath between chaos and calm, that was hers. Hers alone, and no one could decorate that. 2 weeks later, Elena stood on the Ridge again. Same boots. Same shale. Same wind scraping against the rocks. The desert stretched beneath her like a scar that would never quite heal. Wide, sunburned, and honest. Below, the canyon was empty. Now, the patrol route had been rerouted after the ambush. No one moved there anymore. The battlefield was quiet, and somehow that made it louder. She came alone this time. No radio, no rifle, no orders, just her, and a mug of coffee Becker had handed her that morning with a smirk. Dead-Eye Doc's gotta revisit her legend sometime. She'd rolled her eyes. But she still brought the coffee. The wind pushed her hair across her cheek. As she settled near the same rock she'd braced her rifle on during the shot, the gouge her boot had made when she knelt was still there, half filled with dust, but unmistakable. She sipped, eyes scanning the valley floor. A hawk circled lazily. Above the cliffs, unbothered by memory or aftermath, it felt surreal. Like the shot had never happened. Like time had folded over the Ridge, rewinding, pretending it had been just another quiet day in Overwatch. But her body remembered. Her breath did. The pull of the trigger still echoed in her shoulder. She hadn't fired since that day. Didn't feel the need. Behind her, boots crunched over stone. She didn't turn around. I thought I said I was going alone. Becker dropped beside her, uninvited but not unwelcome. You said that. I ignored it. He set down his own mug and leaned back on his palms. They sat in silence for a while. You know, he said eventually, they sent the footage up the chain. I figured. They're giving you a citation. Silver Star. Whole things being put in the briefing decks for future Overwatch training. Elena blinked. For one shot? Becker turned toward her, amused. For the one shot that changed the engagement. For the medic who crossed the Ridge under fire and stabilized 2 men, while half the team couldn't even move. For the soldier who kept her head when half of HQ lost theirs. She took another sip. Still don't feel like a hero. You never will. That's how we know you are one. She let that settle between them. The kind of silence where nothing more needed to be said, not because the conversation was over, but because the truth had already landed. Below, the shadows stretched longer over the canyon floor. Elena traced a finger through the dirt beside her, drawing a small line where the barrel of her rifle had rested. The shape was instinctive. She could still remember the pressure, the way her hands had trembled just enough to notice, but not enough to stop her. Jay's awake now, Becker said. Talks about you like you're a ghost. Sighed he thought he hallucinated you until he saw the bullet trajectory report. Elena chuckled softly. And Lanton wants your signature on his cast. Hard pass. Becker grinned. They're calling you Ridge Walker now, by the way. Guess Deadeye Doc didn't stick. Thank God. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her pants. Her legs ached, not from exertion, but from memory. She walked a few steps to the edge of the ridge and looked down, measuring the distance. It wasn't far. Maybe 40 meters. Maybe 100. It had felt endless when she made the descent alone. You know what scared me most? She asked. Becker rose, adjusting his sling. What? That it didn't scare me. Not enough. Not like I thought it should. I didn't freeze. I didn't panic. I just moved. I saw the target, and I moved. Becker tilted his head. You think that's a bad thing? I don't know, she admitted. I think it makes me someone different than I was before. He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. That's what combat does. It doesn't break you. It replaces you. If you're lucky, the new version still remembers the old one. She nodded slowly, her gaze sweeping the valley one last time. They stood there together as the sun began to slip behind the hills, casting golden light across the rocks. The wind died a little, soft enough to let the desert breathe. After a moment, Becker turned. You ready to head back? Elena hesitated. Then she nodded double quotes. Yeah, she said. Let's go. As they walked away from the ridge, the rock behind her held no monument, no plaque, no flag, just a dent in the dirt where a medic had once braced her rifle and fired one impossible shot. But that was enough. Because sometimes the battlefield remembers in silence. In stone. In legend passed from one exhausted voice to another over cold coffee and dust. And Elena Martinez, medic, soldier, survivor, would carry the ridge in her bones for the rest of her life. One shot, one moment. One medic who didn't wait for permission. And everything changed.